expectation of Auckland transport. Claire is coming up to speak to this. And Alistair.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you, committee members. Look, I'm just going to provide a brief introduction to this item. You'll be aware that the letter of expectations for the Council's other CCOs was discussed earlier this week at the CCO Direction and Oversight Committee. And so just by way of reminder, in a normal year, letters of expectation are kind of workshopped and sent out prior to Christmas. This year, because of the decisions that were made in mid-December around the CCO reform, we determined that we would have to take them after Christmas, and this is the first available opportunity. The proposed content was largely is drawn from the final mayoral proposal and the annual budget that was agreed, and the decisions of the Budget Committee on the 4th of December and the governing body on the 12th of December. It also reflects inputs from subject matter experts across the council and from the Hokora Secretariat staff. Given the kind of the very tight time frame that we've got now, we offered an in-person drop-in session in late January for councillors, and we also offered, and that was also for local board chairs and deputy chairs, and we also offered a 30-minute online session for local boards, of which we had 3 local boards take that up. The key themes from those engagements, which, you know, we didn't have time to include them in the report when it was written, was around they would like AT to improve its engagement with local boards. The performance was still seen as being mixed in that area. They wanted more consistency in terms of the engagement, in terms of the reporting, wanted to include things like exception-based reporting, noting that often that was missing in the reporting. And there was an expectation that they would like us to include in the letter around ensuring that local boards were presented with options when they were presented with decisions that they would need to be made, and not just gold-plated or high-spec standard considerations. You'll see in the report that there are some common expectations to all CCOs, and then there are the ones that are specific to AT. I won't go through them all now, I will take them as read. The report seeks your approval for the proposed content, and following which there'd be a delegation to the Mayor, the Deputy Chair and Chair of this committee to finalise and issue those letters. And we do need to get them out as soon as possible after this meeting, given that the draft submission technically is due on the 1st of March, but we are seeking a resolution in the report that will allow us to extend it, as we're allowed to under legislation, for an extra month. And so in terms of next steps, this committee will receive the draft SOI by the 1st of April from Auckland Transport, and we have invited Richard Leggett as chair of the AT board to present their draft SOI, and then we will, as staff, come back the following month with our and with your shareholder sort of comments. So I'm happy to take any questions or any further expectations that you may wish to resolve to be included in the letter. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. So reasonably straightforward. Someone like to move? Yep, Mayor, and seconded Shane. Okay, questions? I'm loving that, straightforward. Making up time. Okay, no questions. Thanks very much. I'm picking there'll be no debate. Oh, sorry, did you have a question, Alf?
Yeah, I do, and the only very 2 short ones, Chair.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Tēnā kōrua. The first question is on number 4, bracket 4, Roman numerals, and it relates to planning delivery more than paying for growth. So with the letters of expectation, is there anything around the planning delivery in regards to the CCO reform and the legislative reform? Is there anything there around the process and the timetable of both those to you, Claire and Alistair?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, there is under, I'm not sure what it is in your committee report, but there is a section that sets out that we would like Auckland Transport to work with Council on the government transport reform, and it sets out some expectations in there in terms of it will be a joint process that Auckland Council will lead. We ask for information to be shared in a timely manner. and that they kind of report on any conversations that they have with the government that may be outside of the process that we are working with.
Okay. My second question, I think it'd be my last, and that's in regards to 5 Roman numeral 3, and that is to specific expectations Auckland Transport. Now, I know that we have given Auckland Transport outcomes that we want them to deliver. So again, in the letter of expectations, I'll be interested to see if there's anything in there. I had a look at them and I couldn't see it, but around what delegations it would there need to make what we're asking of Auckland Transport, our CCO, in the next 10 to 20 years, how would that be successful around the delivery?
So currently Auckland Transport have all of the delegations and actually the legislative authority to undertake the transport objectives that we've set for them. Does that answer your question? I'm not. I mean,
it does. I'm sorry to interrupt. I just looked at the priorities that the transport outcomes have got as 10 to 20. We're looking at the timetable that I mentioned around the co-design and also legislative changes. What do we need to make sure that the delegations and the success in regards to the transport outcomes? And I just really, the last one, Chair, is what I just want to find out again, what powers do we as Auckland Council or the governing body want back, just to confirm that. So Claire, is that clear for you?
So in the report, we set out that we want to work with them constructively in terms of responding to what will be forthcoming in terms of the bill, and we don't have that detail. We've been signalled at a high level that it is the strategy, planning, policy functions to come back, and that council will be the road controlling authority. Without the level of detail in terms of what's in the bill, it is quite difficult to actually understand what will be the decision-making and the delegations and the process. So at this point, in the expectations, it is just, please work with us on that. There is a section in the letter of expectation that says there is an expectation that we would still like to accelerate areas where possible. And again, we are asking them to work with us to understand and to be able to come back to the council and provide advice in those areas.
Kia ora, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, no further questions. Thank you, team. Joe, you just want to switch your mic off. Oh, sorry. Okay, any debate on that? All right, it's been moved and seconded. Those in favour say aye. Aye. And against? Okay, the next one up is Recovery Office Update. Mace and Tanya. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, members. It's been a long day for you. We'll try and keep this to the point. I just wanted to, by starting, Mr. Chairman, recognise it's 2 years since ex-tropical cyclone Gabrielle and the tragedies that occurred at Muriwai and the impacts on communities as well. So, and you may have seen Breakfast TV this morning that recognised some of that. In terms of presenting the report, the key purpose today is to report back on the requests you made from us in the December meeting, but also give you a brief update. In terms of keeping this brief, the update really is the program is between 80 and 90% through, whether that's in the transport roading program, categorisations, buyouts, our community navigation and resilience program. So good progress is being made in terms of categorisation. Our forecast is to complete that by the end of March, and then with a deadline we're working to the end of the year to complete the buyouts home removal will carry on for some time, as we talked to you just a few days ago about. In terms of the substantive issues in the paper and recommendations, we've further been able to refine the forecast for Category 3 from December and reduce that down to a forecast of 1,215 properties. And the drivers for that we explained in December, with additional, quite a large number of people opting into the program, and the impacts being greater, as well as the timing of being able to deliver the Category 2C program or the flood resilience program, leaving people in jeopardy for longer than 2 or 3 years. So our key requests today are for costs that are unavoidable because of the risk to life, and how we're progressing that program of moving to more retreat in some locations than resilience, but still deliver the resilience funding, which you'll consider later in this agenda, so that we can deliver that value for Aucklanders. The key request we have in front of you today is for the Crown to move up to 176.1 million from Category 2 funding into Category 3 within that funding envelope. And for the council's share of the Category 3 buyout costs in 2025 and 2026, moving 159.9 million. Sorry, there's a mistake in the recommendations in the report. So it should be 159.9 rather than 176. That's an error. And identifying a further 16.2 million for the Category 3 buyouts to balance the share arrangement in the Crown funding agreement. And lastly, requiring additional council borrowing as the risk of mitigation budget was phased across 10 years of the long-term plan. So we're bringing money forward, which will have an impact on interest. And then really looking to the business cases, further to for the blue-green network, to identify a further 52.6 million of council capital to fund the Crown, to unlock the Crown funding, which is the Crown's input, it would be 86 million. And lastly, identifying a further 33 million of capital for additional house removal costs, those because of the 311 forecast additional homes, and the complexity of the home removals in terms of how we described that to you last week. Lastly, really seeking the Chief Executive progress those arrangements with the Crown. We did, Mr Chairman, circulate the letter back from the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet for the request for additional money. As we'd indicated before, they are wishing us to work within the existing envelope and shift money from Category 2 to Category 3 within that envelope. And then the governing body, the other request there to the mechanics of getting those requests through. I just asked Tanya, is there anything you wanted to add, Tanya, that I might have missed?
Just one final point, which is that the additional capital funding we expect would be able to be recovered through sales proceeds that can be generated through the storm affected land program.
Apologies, Mr Chairman. Yes, this is, if you like, cost neutral within the envelope of the Crown funding agreement between Council and the Crown, but also that recovery of funding from the safe redevelopment of sites by building differently and also taking advantage of some of the flood resilience works later in this 10-year period.
Okay, thank you. It's been, well, it needs to be moved and seconded. Someone like to move and second? Sure. Oh, thank you, Greg.
Aye.
And Julie. Okay, questions? Mayor.
Thanks, really. Given that we're all a bit concerned about the growth and costs here, and I know we've asked the government for more, have we received a positive response. That's the first question. The second one was, there was a period earlier in the piece when we were operating on much lower numbers of houses that there was an effort by some of us to have a cap on the costs of each one there. That was voted down. Has anyone worked out how much extra cost came from not having a cap? Because if you haven't, I'd like you to do that, so that we get the message when we do these happy, supposedly progressive things, that there's a downside, because it turns out there's a cap on the total amount of money that we didn't vote on, but there isn't a cap on individual pieces, and I'm not sure that I'm happy if people in $5 million homes have to be forced to live in a $4 million home when they might have just got a home. So can you answer those two?
Thank you, Your Worship. Mr Chairman, I'll answer the last one first. No, we don't. I don't have that data in front of me, but we can provide that data. That's no problem at all. And also, I think I provided this assurance before. So, of the 526 homes we've bought as at the end of January or purchased as part of this program, we have recovered 38 million as part of the homeowner contribution, and just on 96 million as part of the insurance recoveries. So we're taking those opportunities as well, but I appreciate.
Well, that's good. And what about response from the government to the request for additional stuff? Have we heard that, or have we just put it in and we're all holding it, crossing our fingers?
We have heard, Your Worship. So the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet wrote to us 2 days ago, and their preference or their clear indications they wish to work inside the Crown funding agreement, so no new money, but they are willing to move money between Category 2 and Category 3 so we can achieve that outcome.
Can move within, but the cap is the cap. So we've got a big cap, but we've got to get little caps. Okay.
Cap's the cap, Your Worship.
Okay, Ken. Thank you. So the money worries me too. Forgetting about the cap, we've just gone from almost 700 homes estimated at the beginning to almost double that. That's made got to be a huge amount of money that is not, how are we accounting for that? How we, how doesn't sum up on my calculator?
Thanks, Mr Chairman. You debated this, you made that decision in December, Councillor Turner. So the estimate at that time was somewhere between 1,205 homes and 1,264. We've refined that categorisation target forecast down now that the option to opt into the scheme has closed, and we're down at 1,215. If we come in at slightly less than that, the Crown will shift any money that remains in Category 3 into Category 2 and allow that to happen. The main drivers for that increase is the impact of the storms that we hadn't, whilst our models demonstrated 700, there's also impacts to properties where we haven't been able to deliver the flood resilience program within a time frame that would give those people certainty to repair their homes and move back in and be in a safe position within a 2 to 3, 4 year period. So
Thank you. I understand and remember the complexity and all the things that are talked about in this. I feel for everybody caught in the situation. The only thing that I've been sitting there waiting to hear, there's a difference between 700 million worth of buyouts and heading towards $1.1 billion worth just in the buyouts. That's what the average of $1 million per home comes to, correct? So I still just sitting and listening, haven't comprehended that huge difference on where we're making that up.
If I may, through the chair, I think it's important to remember that it isn't necessarily an increase in the number of houses, because there has been a significant shift between the properties that we thought we would categorise as 2C and that would benefit from the community resilience flood mitigation work, and those now being moved into Category 3. So they're the same properties that we looked at initially, but they just have, a different intolerable risk to life categorisation. And then in addition to that, we were asked to make sure that we had made every effort possible to contact homeowners who may be left in situations of intolerable risk to life. So we did undertake a campaign to contact those homeowners, and it did result in an increased number of registrations.
So please bear with me. The 2 Cs and the 2 Ps or whatever it was and all that stuff, they were much less of cost of funding those problems. And if we've moved those properties into the category 3, I suppose in a nutshell, are you telling me that I've got no worries about the money, there's dollars in the bank, and you won't be asking for a big cheque to fill up a hole?
That's the nature of the proposal here, Councillor Turner, as we're working inside the envelope, accepting we are proposing here, and you to consider the policy later in this agenda, to realise and optimise some of the value of the land through safe sales.
Okay, thank you. That leads me to my last question. I've run into 2 or 3 situations where I've been asked specifically to find out. So cross-lease properties, where one person finds out that the other participant in the cross-lease has been brought out, leaving us with land that comes with a bunch of legal obligations as the cross-lease owner. And they're saying to me, how's council going to manage those obligations of the cross-lease owner? And my other question is, the rat tail of cost, how are we going to fund that going forward?
Yes, that's absolutely correct. So homeowners are able to opt into the scheme based on their property, so individual homeowners, and that's how the categorisation scheme works, is that each individual property was assessed in terms of the level of risk. So that has meant that we have quite a number of situations where we will become effectively in a shared ownership type arrangement with cross leases and multi-unit, so body corporate situations. The next paper on the agenda does deal with the storm affected land program and how we intend to manage those types of situations. But we are setting up a team that will be focused on resolving those more complex arrangements.
Okay, thank you. And I'll wait to then, but my question was on behalf of the people who've left behind, not the ones that are going. So thank you.
Yeah.
Certainly, Mr Chairman, just picking that up, Councillor Turner, that is becoming a good neighbour. So some of the policy, the principles in the policy is about being a good neighbour. And in some cases we're actually members of the body corporate, so we have a role in various guises, and that's the complexity of some of these situations we find ourselves in. But the optimisation and working our way through that process as efficiently and effectively as we can is what our focus is.
Greg. Yeah, thank you, Chair. One of my questions I think is probably better for the next item, but if I could ask this question just around, or you might want to defer it most to the next item, just around the immediate, there's a number of these houses perhaps sitting vacant now, and I know you mentioned there was security, last meeting, looking after them, but, how many of these houses are being broken into or copper stripped out of them, that type of thing? Is that a concern? Is that something that's escalating?
Mr Chairman, yes, Councillor says it is a concern and that is occurring, so we are working collaboratively with neighbours, with community groups, with the police and some of our own security patrols to target areas where there are impacts like that. It is also, of course, concern for neighbours that are around those homes or people in the same block of units. So that is a concern that we are seeing crime and security. That was one of the most significant issues in Christchurch. So we were somewhat prepared, but the nature of homes spread across all of Auckland creates a challenge. But our approach, now we're at in the order of exceeding 500 homes in ownership, we are accelerating that home removal program and able to forecast with the nature of the home removal program of getting clusters of homes dealt with more quickly and more effectively, and I should say more cost effectively as well. in those locations to avoid that vandalism and or theft.
Thank you for that. And I guess this is a kind of a future, looking forward into the future around our own unitary plan, and the fact, you know, if I own some land and I want to build something on there, there's some risk there. I can hire a consultant to come and give me a good report, and then might be able to build there. So, what can you just give me some guidance, or I guess I'm looking for some sort of confidence around how we protect against future housing being built in inappropriate areas where, you know, you're countering somebody who really wants to build something there. You know, you can hire a consultant to support that.
Oh, apologies, Mr. Chairman. Certainly, Councillor Sayers, I think we can deal with it in the next paper as well, but the key approach is there is a program around strengthening the unitary plan, and Megan Tyler's team is working on that, John Dogood particularly, and Phil Reid, and I'm sure they'll be updating you. Secondly, in terms of our hazard mapping, the hazard maps have been updated for flooding already that are associated with the unitary plan. The public portal of the flood viewer, in terms of knowledge, we've had over 800,000 hits on the flood viewer since it was launched in June 2023. So a lot of interest in people doing their due diligence, but and the same goes for the other natural hazards as well. But there is a program in place to strengthen the unitary plan through the policy and planning team.
If I may, just a complementary question to that. In terms of the limbs, my impression is that if I've been categorised, then I've got something on my limb, but if I'm in a hazard area, that's not necessarily on my limb. That's something that we have to do through the unitary plan and the maps, etc., and a potential buyer looks at. Is that correct?
There's a couple of things there, Councillor Sayers. Certainly categorisation for threes go on the limb, but if there can be remediation, that can be removed, and it's seen as removed. The other thing on a limb is usually hazard maps, whether that's wind or flooding or other natural hazards are included as part of the limb. They are complex to read, so it's important people get assistance with reading that. The other issue is on the titles. So under the Building Act, Section 72, or formerly Section 36, notices for unstable land are on the title, and that doesn't appear on the limb. So it is important that people get that advice from when conveyancing has occurred or when they're purchasing a property.
Okay, thank you. No other questions. So,
Mr. Chairman, just quickly, this is aimed at the officials, but it's not a question. Congratulations. This morning, and I don't throw bouquets out a lot, but I watched Breakfast TV. They were set to tear you guys to shreds about how hopeless it was, and council was short. And they ended up talking to some people at Muriwai, and they said it's been fantastic. We've got our settlement early, and they kept saying, "But has it been real?" "Oh, it's been fantastic. We can't." And in the end, your poor old TVNZ reporter was just stuffed because you'd done such a good job. So well done.
Thank you, Councillor Williamson. I'll pass
Okay,
that
Julie.
on to the team.
Yeah, thanks. And I just wanted to speak to congratulate you on 80% done. You know, that's pretty amazing in the space of 2 years when we came into this pretty underprepared. And I think we've all learnt about that and put in a lot of changes since then. But also to note that the 20% remaining is some of the hardest stuff. So, I guess great that we've made it this far, and thank you for acknowledging 2 years since we lost those people in Muriwai and people's lives were changed there. And that earlier this year it was 2 years for a lot of people in my ward in terms of those storms. My experience personally dealing with tragedy is that the first year is survival, the second year is more like recovery, and then you start to really move on and get into the next chapter and stuff. And I'm really hoping that over the next year we can help as many people as possible who are still in that 20% to get there. So thank you and your teams for the mahi.
Richard.
Thank you, Chair. Amazing work, and you can look at those numbers and no wonder it feels like on the shore and a couple of other places around the city how widespread it is when you look at the number discrepancies. My reading of the numbers, and I have been asked by local MPs and ministers around exactly our advocacy. Can I just, because I know the formula is different for the blue-green compared to the buyout, so moving money upward becomes sort of a reduction in what we can access, if that sounds. Are we being clear with the government that without additional funding, we will be dramatically, I mean, I know this is in the next section, but this ask or this continued advocacy, are we making it clear that without, like, we're doing our bit because there's far more Cat 3 houses than we predicted, but actually what it will mean is a reduction in blue-green network within this LTP. Are they aware that them helping play their side of the overall agreement would help do all of that?
Thank you, Councillor Hills. Yes, they are aware of that. At the moment, I think there is no more further funding available from the Crown, and the commitment is that as part of these projects, they would need to be considered through the LTP process. And I think there's no doubt that further advocacy will be required to central government potentially. But yes, they're aware of the impact on the overall program when we started this project.
And understanding the move arounds, and I'm sure or hopefully they'll be fine with that, but will it end up meaning a reduction in the overall Crown funding at the end? Or we've managed to kind of exhaust the calculations?
No, Councillor Hills, this proposal unlocks the entire Crown funding in the Crown funding agreement.
Okay. And we feel confident that they'll probably do that, but there's still no movement on the overall quantum.
That's correct. All indications we have in the letter that we circulated from Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet was that they will do that, but they haven't indicated any other funding at this stage.
Cool. And very last question, because there is so many hundreds of people who will, or thousands that will miss out on this process, are we still, or is government still helping with the support and advocacy for those people? Like, I know navigators are still, here far longer than we expected, etc. Are there other ways we can be saying to government we need some help with this social service side advocacy, because there's still a lot of pain and hurt out there, even though we can't help with buying their house or building infrastructure?
Yes, the community and social recovery program is still quite busy. I am pleased to say that we are seeing a reduction in the number of people and whānau families that we are supporting, from over 800 in October down to just early 600s. That's still a lot of families, but we are seeing, as Councillor Ferry said, that recovery of people. The Crown or the government agencies are still supporting temporary accommodation assistance, temporary accommodation service, and the Insurance Claims Resolution Service has supported over 900 families for claims, most of which have been resolved. So we are still providing those supports. Additionally, we are working in communities to look at the recovery in their communities and get community feedback ahead of any future use of land. I trust that helps.
Okay, no further questions. Thank you very much. Any debate or comments? No. Okay, those in favour say aye. And against carried. Thank you. Next item up is the policy at Mason. So Rebecca's going to come up and join